We got undefeated Central Michigan taking on undefeated Pitt Panthers. What a matchup we have, because heading into this game, I didn't think both of these teams were going to be undefeated, just because obviously I picked Central Michigan to lose to San Jose State. Like, that wasn't my prediction. I said it in the recap. I was completely wrong. And we have two teams coming in this game with a lot of momentum. I would say actually Central Michigan maybe has a little bit more momentum coming into this game just because of the opponent they beat, just because they were on the road on the West Coast. There's a lot of momentum going into this game for Central Michigan. And I think that's a very, very good thing, especially against a pretty good, in my opinion, Pitt team who's led by Eli Holstein, who in his first week had a pretty good game, threw for 215 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. And he's a guy that's a little bit mobile as well. He ran for 41 yards, 7 attempts there. So he's a guy that could cause this Central Michigan defense some issues, especially with using his legs. But he's not going to be the only one that could possibly cause Central Michigan some issues, because they ran the ball for 158 yards, 27 carries, and Desmond Reed was the leading rusher. And he's going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of the carries, but there's also going to be other guys that are going to get the carries as well. Like, he might not be taking every single rep, but they're going to be able to get these running backs going in. It was really by committee in week one, obviously with the opponent they were facing, with just dominating them. That's probably a big reason why, but he's definitely someone I'm looking out for to watch in this game. And you really have a couple of these wide receivers, and one really strength of this team is just like the amount of depth and just who they can get it to in the wide receiver room. And it really starts with guys like Bryce Yates, Katarius Hicks, Kenny Johnson. Those three had the majority of the catches in their last game. Those three are going to be guys that this Central Michigan secondary are going to really have to focus on. And we obviously saw in the San Jose State game, Central Michigan did a pretty good job defending the pass. Now, obviously, they did let one guy go off, but that guy going off didn't necessarily hurt them in the long run. So I think that's going to be maybe a little bit of their approach there heading into this game against this offense in Pitt. And you have Central Michigan defensively. They were able to really take advantage of these mistakes that San Jose State made. And I think that's really going to be the biggest difference again in this game is, can CMU muck up this game? And if they do, can they take the opportunity to force turnovers? And I think that was the biggest difference between how they won and why they wouldn't have won the San Jose State game, was because they were able to force turnovers. And Pitt did have some turnovers. Like I said at the beginning, Eli Holstein did have 1 interception in this game. Now, he did throw for 4 touchdowns, didn't have to throw for a ton of yards, but I think that, again, has to do with the opponent that they face. But this is going to be a matchup for Central Michigan defensively that's going to be definitely a more of a challenge, just because while I do think San Jose State had some talented wide receivers, I think this Pitt team is a much better running team. I think this Pitt team is going to be a lot more physical as well. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be okay with playing a physical style of football, which we all know that Central Michigan likes to play. That's one of the big reasons why Central Michigan won this game, is because they were able to muck up the game against San Jose State. I think this is a good enough defense that if they're able to hold a guy like Eli Holstein to not having to throw 4 touchdowns, if they're able to not let Desmond Reed or any of these other running backs go off, and then they can contain guys like Bryce Yates, Katarius Hicks, and Kenny Johnson, I think this is a defense that is good enough to do that. And I think it's, if they do that, I think they're really going to have a shot here. But then you look on the other side of the ball for Pitt, and especially Central Michigan. Pitt's going to have a pretty unique game plan going into this, because Central Michigan plays 3 quarterbacks, and that's exactly what they did in game 1. And I think that's going to be something that they continue to do. You have a guy like Angel Flores, you have a guy like Joe Labas, you have a couple of quarterbacks that do different things. And I think that's why in this game, linebacker play, especially when it comes from Pitt's side, is going to be extremely important. And you have a guy like Kyle Lewis, who basically flew around last week. He made a ton of noise. He actually was the ACC linebacker of the week. They also have a guy in Rasheem Bites that is another linebacker to watch. Like, he was a top 10 graded linebacker coming into the season, according to PFF. Linebacker play is going to be something that's going to be really tested. Linebacker play is going to be a really huge part of what Pitt is going to do defensively. And then you look at what Pitt has in the secondary. Like, you have a guy like Pat Narduzzi that has a ton of talent and has a ton of knowledge when it comes to defense, because obviously he was a defensive coordinator at Michigan State for a really long time with really great defenses. He's going to have to rely on these kind of defensive backs to make plays. And he even said in a press conference a couple of days ago that he basically trusts them, that they're reliable guys in the defensive back room. He trusts the linebackers. This is going to be a defense that's going to play physical football, and that's where this real question about what is this offensive line going to do for Central Michigan. Is Central Michigan going to be able to play that physical type of offense that really had their will and their way against San Jose State? They did end up losing their starting center. It was announced by Coach Strinkle that he tore his ACL, which is obviously a big loss for them. Central Michigan's going to have to replace that. But again, if you can muck up the game, if you can make it close, if you can play physical football, that's going to be something that I'm going to keep an eye on for this. And if Central can stick around in this game, it is a 21.5-point spread at this point. I do think Pitt does win this game. I know I made a mistake against San Jose State. I do think Pitt is better than San Jose State. I think they have a little bit more physicality that they can play with. I think they can absolutely match what Central Michigan wants to do. And I think really if Pitt does win this game, I think if you're Central, I think you're still pretty happy with going 1-1 in your first two games, especially with opportunities like against Pitt, with opportunities like San Jose State. And if you end up winning this game, you truly are putting yourself on the radar a little bit. I'm not saying that this is going to be a team that is going to be going to a college football playoff or a team that's going to be going undefeated. I'm not saying that whatsoever, but if you end up getting a win at San Jose State and getting a win against Pitt, which would be, I believe, their fifth ever win against a Power 4 team. I believe Adam Jaska tweeted about that earlier today. You're really starting to have people watch you. And I think that is really the biggest difference of just college football nowadays and the transfer portal is you have a lot of teams, especially MAC level teams, that get so hurt through the transfer portal that they get all their best players, quote unquote, getting taken from them, or all their players are transferring out. If you can really go into this game against Pitt as a 21.5-point underdog and end up winning this game or even making it respectable, I think that's really going to play a long-term factor into Central Michigan. I think you're going to start to put the MAC on notice. I think you're going to start to put some fans across the country on notice just because of the way that Coach Drinkle plays, just the way that these guys play for each other. I think this could make it really interesting. I unfortunately do think Pitt does win this game. I actually am going to guess that the spread that Central Michigan actually covers. I do think this is going to be less than a 3-possession game at the end of it. So I do think that Central does cover, but obviously losing your center is extremely difficult to overcome. Obviously, they will have a guy to replace him there. Just going to be really tough to beat this Pitt team. But hey, we've seen the Central Michigan team do it in the past. Maybe they can do it again this week, but you have to give full-on credit because these guys are going to be ready. These guys are going to play physical. These guys are not going to give up. And I think that's just really the culture and the atmosphere Coach Drinkle is trying to build. And I think we've seen it. I think they're going to continue to play with that. I just think that Pitt is a little bit more built that way than San Jose State was. And I think because of that, Pitt ends up winning this game. So if you liked this preview of the CMU versus Pitt game, there's other previews as well. There's Western Michigan. Obviously, anyone listening to this probably aren't going to want to listen to Western Michigan or Eastern Michigan, but there's also Michigan State. There's Michigan. There's Elma. There's Hope. There's a ton of other previews coming up. I'm trying to put out as much content as possible. And then obviously, I will end up recapping this game. But yeah, I think Central Michigan just falls a little bit short. I think they're going to go 1-1. And I think at the end of the day, if you're a player, coach, or a fan listening to this, I think you're pretty happy if you go 1-1, and you're absolutely thrilled if you end up winning this game against Pitt.